When police finally stepped into apartment 47 on Svobody Street, they expected a simple vandal. Instead, they found dolls. Dozens of life-size figures sitting on couches, propped against walls, tucked gently into corners, dressed in bright children's clothes with painted faces, bows, and toys. It took investigators a moment to realize these were not dolls at all. They were the mummified remains of real children. The man who lived here was not a serial killer. He never dug a single grave to bury anyone. He opened them. This is the story of Anatoly Moskvin, the historian, the cemetery expert, and the doll maker of Nizhny Novgorod. By every official measure, Anatoly Yuryevich Moskvin looked like a quiet, eccentric academic. Born in 1966 in Gorky, now known as Nizhny Novgorod, he grew up in the late Soviet era. He was intelligent, socially awkward, obsessed with history and languages. He eventually studied philology at Moscow State University and became a respected linguist and historian. He spoke up to 13 languages. He wrote books, papers, and articles on Celtic history and local folklore. Colleagues described him as strange, but brilliant. A man who preferred books to people, cemeteries to cafes. In the mid-2000s, a local academic project turned his life in a darker direction. A publisher asked him to create a detailed survey of cemeteries across the Nizhny Novgorod region. Names on graves, dates, inscriptions, local burial customs. For 2 years, Moskvin walked on foot from cemetery to cemetery, more than 700 in total, according to his own claims. He slept in haystacks, in abandoned farmhouses, and sometimes among the graves themselves. To outsiders, he was simply a devoted researcher. To the newspapers he wrote for, he was the resident necropolist, a man who knew every corner of every graveyard in the region. No one realized how deeply those places were changing him, or what he had already started to do. Moskvin later traced his obsession back to one childhood moment. As a boy, he attended the funeral of an 11-year-old girl. He claimed that during the ceremony, adults forced him to kiss the girl's face, a ritual farewell he neither wanted nor understood. He wrote that he felt something like a bond form in that moment, a connection to the dead that never left him. Over the years, his fascination with death, rituals, and burial only deepened. He studied folklore, occult traditions, and local cemetery legends with academic precision, but also with something more personal. Friends and colleagues noticed his quirks, but quirks are easy to dismiss in the academic world. He rarely dated. He lived with his parents well into adulthood. He spoke openly about regret, that he had never married, never had children, especially a daughter. That longing would soon merge with his graveyard obsession in a way no one could have predicted. Meanwhile, in the cemeteries around Nizhny Novgorod, families slowly began to notice something wrong. Children's graves, specifically graves of young girls, were being disturbed. Flowers displaced, wreaths moved, sometimes small decorations went missing. At first, people blamed teenagers and vandals. No one thought to suspect the quiet historian who spent his days cataloging headstones and writing about death. Between roughly 2003 and 2011, Moskvin's private world crossed a line the public could not see. Using his deep knowledge of cemetery layouts and schedules, he began visiting children's graves at night. He selected the graves of young girls, some as young as 3, girls who had died years earlier, often from accidents or illness. He later claimed he felt they were calling out to him, that he believed their souls were lonely and trapped. In his mind, he said, he was rescuing them. He would open the grave, remove the remains as carefully as he could, and take them back to the apartment he shared with his parents. Then, in that small, cluttered flat, he did something at once methodical and deeply disturbing. He created his own method of preservation, a crude, homemade mummification process using salts and baking materials. He wrapped the remains, patted them, and slowly rebuilt them into life-size figures. Over the years, he turned at least 26 to 29 sets of remains into what he called his dolls. He dressed them in children's clothing, dresses, stockings, shoes, jackets. He added masks or crafted faces using fabric, wax, or paint. Some had wigs, some wore ribbons or hats. Many were seated in his bedroom, living room, even in his parents' room. From the outside, they looked like large homemade toys, uncanny and unsettling, but not immediately recognizable as human remains. To Moskvin, they were not props. They were his girls. He gave them names, he celebrated their birthdays, he claimed to read stories to them, watch cartoons with them, and speak to them as if they were alive. According to later reports, he insisted he never harmed anyone and never saw them as objects of desire. He called them his children. He told investigators he believed that one day, science or some ritual might allow him to revive them, or at least to preserve their spirits until that day. All of this was happening in a normal apartment block, in a busy Russian city, with neighbors on every side and his own parents sleeping across the hall. By 2011, complaints about grave desecrations could no longer be ignored. Families were terrified to visit their children's graves and find them disturbed, altered, sometimes partially opened. Police launched an investigation into what they first believed was a case of hate-motivated vandalism because several Muslim graves had been disturbed. They followed footprints, tire tracks, and patterns on maps of local cemeteries. Eventually, their clues converged on one name: the cemetery expert, the historian, the man who knew every grave in the region, Anatoly Moskvin. On November 22, 2011, officers entered his home. What they found stunned even experienced investigators. In room after room, seated on shelves, couches, and beds, were the dolls. Some wore bright dresses, some had scarves or hats, some were arranged with toys or school notebooks, as if they were frozen mid-childhood. At first glance, they appeared to be eerie, homemade mannequins, but the smell in the apartment and the documents found alongside them, maps of cemeteries, grave plaques, photographs of open graves, told a different story. When forensic teams examined the figures, they confirmed the truth. Inside these dolls were the preserved remains of girls and young women who had been buried years earlier. In total, authorities reported discovering 26 bodies in the apartment and garage, though some sources still list up to 29. Evidence from graveyards suggested he may have disturbed as many as 100 to 150 graves over the years. Neighbors who had long complained about a strange odor now learned its source. His parents, who often traveled and were away for long periods, later said they thought their son simply had a strange passion for large dolls. They never imagined they were sharing their home with the dead. Moskvin was arrested and charged under Article 244 of the Russian Criminal Code, desecration of graves and bodies. Initially, investigators also considered hate crime charges, but those were later dropped. He was not charged with murder because he had not killed any of the children's graves he opened. Psychiatric evaluations concluded that he suffered from a form of paranoid schizophrenia. In May 2012, a court declared him unfit to stand trial and ordered compulsory psychiatric treatment instead of a conventional prison sentence. For the families of the girls, this decision was devastating. They had buried their daughters once, then been forced to face the knowledge that their resting places had been disturbed, their remains taken, reshaped, and kept in a stranger's apartment for years. Moskvin, however, did not see himself as a monster. He repeatedly claimed that he believed he was helping the children, that he was rescuing them from the cold earth, bringing them into the warmth of his home. Some reports say he believed science or occult practices might one day restore them or allow their consciousness to live on through cloning. Others see his actions as the extreme product of loneliness, mental illness, and unresolved grief. A man desperate for companionship, trying to build a family from the dead. Over the years, courts have repeatedly reviewed his psychiatric status. As recently as 2025, Russian media reported that his confinement in a secure psychiatric facility has been extended again, after concerns from doctors and families about his release. He remains there to this day. For investigators and psychologists, the case of Anatoly Moskvin raises difficult questions. Where is the line between obsession and psychosis? Between a man who loves cemeteries and a man who brings the cemetery home? In the end, the story of Anatoly Moskvin is not about a classic horror villain lurking in the dark. It is about something quieter and in some ways more unsettling. A gifted historian, a respected academic, a man trusted with the memories of the dead, who turned that trust into something no one could have imagined. For almost a decade, he lived surrounded by what he called his daughters. He arranged them, dressed them, spoke to them, and moved among them every day, in a small apartment, in a normal building, in a city full of people who thought he was merely odd. The cemeteries of Nizhny Novgorod eventually reclaimed their missing dead, but the families who had to rebury their children will never truly recover from the second loss. And as for Moskvin, the man who walked through hundreds of graveyards before he decided to open them, one question still lingers. Was he driven purely by illness, a mind broken beyond repair? Or did something else awaken in those long, lonely walks through the land of the dead? Something that looked at a grave and saw not an ending, but an invitation.